only
We're
sevens
live.
and threes and
We're
zeros.
live.
We're live.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to return to sports betting right now. And I understand we have the director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission, Charles Moore, with us. Welcome, Mr. Moore. Must be bright and early there. Are you 2 or 3 hours difference?
Three.
Yes, it is. Good morning, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you having me and inviting me. I have been out on the East, so I had to make the transition back to Wyoming time. So I'm on your time schedule in my head. I flew back in from Lexington, Kentucky last evening. So, but thank you.
Let me, before you start and introduce yourself, let me just frame the issue of what we're dealing with right now. We're towards the end of our session, and there's been a push on our committee to see if we can get something up and running in the next 6 to 8 months. It's going to be a heavy lift in the legislature to get that through, and we want to do our due diligence and I feel in order to do that, in essence, it's going to be probably more delegation of responsibility and enabling the lottery commission and the lottery commission here, which is our department, which would oversee this with more authority than we might otherwise do in terms of the time frames we have if we can get it up and running. I keep forgetting the term again.
Speed to market. Speed to market. Got it.
So there's a little anxiety amongst some of our senators about moving so fast, and we wonder if that is well placed or not. So if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience and any advice you may have for us.
Yes, thank you. Charles Moore. I'm the director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. Speed to market. We stood up sports wagering and we did an online platform. We have no brick and mortar. We did the online platform and stood it up in 140 days. Our rule process is probably very similar to yours and in most states. In a best case scenario, typically it would take us 6 months or longer. We did utilize a very aggressive approach to this. We had to. We had a September 1 deadline that was mandated, and there was an anxiety. Initially, it was an earlier deadline, and we got it extended prior to the signing of the bill. It was amended, but the anxiety is real. But with focus, with utilizing some third-party assistance to bring it to market, we were able to do that.
And Charles, what year was this? What year
this was that's a great question. This was in 2021.
Oh, geez, this was just last year.
Yes. We stood it up, and again, I hope I'm not stepping on the formalities here. I hope it's all right to address you directly.
Yes.
Questions, or if you prefer me to go through. Okay. Yes, we stood it up September of 2021 is when we went live, and we had 140 some days to do that. And I'm very much a mission focused kind of an individual, and we focused on it and we were able to bring it to market. Was it stressful? Absolutely. Was there a lot of concerns bringing it forward? Absolutely. That's the nature of our business. We want to protect the public. We want to do all those things and do it the right way, but we did do it. And the question is, when you bring something that quickly, what have you missed maybe? Well, at this point, it appears to be nothing. And again, the fortunate part of this, I believe, is we did have it's a competitive market. We currently now, I believe, it was said in testimony earlier, 3 operators up and running. I believe we have flat 5 now. And it is a competitive market. I think that competitive market has brought in more participants from that illegal market and raising those dollars and getting those dollars increased to us. But also with that competitive market, we initially, we had a lot of Zoom calls. We tried to front load our rules with public comments prior to going into our formal process and trying to work with our stakeholders. And we patterned a lot of our process going into this off of the Colorado market, where they brought in a ton of people and had a lot of communication from the stakeholders. And those stakeholders are not only the operators, the individuals working in the space, but it's you all, and it's the public.
Sure. Yes. Charles, when you talk about the number of participants, what are just 2 questions, since you've been live since September of 2021, how many participants, and how many do you think you've pulled out of the illegal market? Are there still people, as far as you can tell, participating in the illegal offshore market? And what are the dollars? What have you seen in revenue, and what's, if you'd be willing to share your contract revenue agreement?
Yes, and thank you for that question. I don't have the most current user interfaces, but at one point it was 26,000 participants that have been pulled over. And because with the illegal market, we don't have that real definitive number to compare to. These are estimates. These are what we've been able to draw on. So that's hard, and that might be more of a question of the operators, the FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, some of those. The revenues, we have a 10% tax rate, and at this point, we started out, we had a negative tax revenues in September, but then we started jumping up, and our grand total through March of this year is $222,362.54. Bear in mind, while we're very similar in population, we have 490 some people in the state of Wyoming. We're scattered over 95,000 square miles. So we have we're not as congested, but I think you have 600 and some thousand people in your state, I believe. That's what I read.
So can I ask a question, Mr. Moore? You said a 10% tax rate. We're hearing like a 50% rate on, I guess, the earnings of the company. Is your 10% on the handle?
It's on the gross gaming revenues.
Gross gaming revenues, does that mean profits of the company?
If you'd like to, I can bring in my sports wagering analysis individual if you'd like, and we can get that question answered for you. I don't have that information in front of me right at this point. I apologize for that.
Okay. And let's go on, because there's a real wide range there from what we understand people who go out to bid are willing to share as their with the state. We've heard 50%, and 10% sounds awful low, but it may be a different figure.
Yes, it's the 10% is very similar to what we have in the surrounding states, and one of the things that you notice, depending on how you approach this, you're trying to bring those individuals from the illegal market. So it has to be a lower, very aggressive rate to get them to move from that illegal market. Then once you've got those individuals moved to the legal market, you know, they typically will stay there at that point.
Say the illegal market, are you aware in Wyoming or any other place where an illegal offshore or whatever gaming operation actually moves to the legal market, or they just continue to operate?
You know, that's, I believe if I heard the question correct, right, you know, the question was, once they move, do they stay in the legal market? Was that the question?
Well, the question is, there are all these illegal markets, you probably know some of them, Bet US or Bet USA or all that. Do any of them sign up with the state and all of a sudden turn the switch from being illegal to being legal and move their whole operation and get a contract with you?
Now, I thank you for the rephrasing that. I appreciate that. We have not seen that at this point in time. Again, the ones that we have at this point, and for us, one of the things that they put in the bill with us was you had to be operating in 3 jurisdictions in North America. So, you know, it was and that whole piece was what allowed us to tip this up so quickly as well. The individuals that came to us have been in several markets. Typically, they're in 10 to 15 other markets in the United States. So we were able to pull our background checks, work on all that, and get that and bring it all to market in a very quick manner because of that.
So you have 5 contractors at this point?
Excuse me?
You have 5 contractors at this point, agents?
We have up and running currently, I believe we've got 4 or 5 at this point in time. And I can send, I would have no problem sending you the list of what we have or sharing any of that information with your committee.
So you're saying one of the elements of, I don't know if it was in your statute, that gave you a little more comfort from the anxiety of the time frame was that you could only select among the experienced operators who worked in at least 3 states. That was part of the law.
Yes, that was in our statutes, yes.
Is there other things you could tell us that would give us comfort on getting this up and running quickly?
Yes, and again, thank you for the question. What we've found is working with these different companies and working with 5 or 6 of them at this point, and we have a few more that are in the pipeline. You know, the cooperation has been very good. If we need something, it's quick to get to us. And again, the initial standing this up, you know, we had to get a lot of information very quickly and get the right information and build those relationships. You know, the other piece to this is look to the neighboring states, look to other states that have stood this up quickly. You know, if it comes to fruition with you, it's always very helpful. You know, you develop those relationships, and whether it's with the lottery, with a racing commission or whoever, they've developed those relationships with other states, and so you can make that work. And excuse me, I had a phone go off. I apologize for that. So, you know, my recommendation also would be there are industry experts that are out there that you can utilize, consulting firms that can help bring this to market quickly. And, you know, I would suggest looking into that as well. So from my point of view, from dealing with sports wagering most recently. We also have skill-based amusement games. We have charitable gaming under our purview. We have horse racing, and we also have the gambling machines that are associated with horse racing. It's been probably one of our easier tasks, to be very honest with you. And being that we do not allow for a brick and mortar presence, that's also been helpful for us with the online presence only. So I think that's it, and I sure would stand for additional questions.
So did you in any way, in standing it up, did you hire any consultants to work with you, to advise you, or did you just do it from your in-house?
Yes, thank you for the question again. Yes, we did. We hired a consulting firm, upon passage, even prior to the governor authorizing the legislation. We had reached out to a few consulting firms, and we have consulting contracts with a few firms that assist us, and we broadened the scope of those consulting contracts and utilize those individuals. In the initial launch, working with the consulting firms and working with other gaming entities and working with our Attorney General's office, our meetings were 3-day a week, fairly extensive meetings with everyone when we stood that up. And that, went on to, for 140 some days until our initial launch in September.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. So it sounds like it's been sort of seamless, no problem so far. Only revenue.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
What is your goal? What's your revenue goal for this? And I guess I have two questions. What is your revenue goal, and who is the major energy force behind this? The legislature, the administration, the people of Wyoming, the racers?
Yeah. The first part of the question, what is our goal? Of course, like in any regulatory field, the goal is our mission, which is protecting the wagering public. So, that is our end goal. And it's also a revenue situation for us as well, generating additional revenues. Early on, it appeared some of the projections were fairly high on the illegal market. We would like to get closer to, we would of course love to see our revenues generated. It goes to our general fund. And it also, we have a large portion of it that does go over to our Department of Health to fund, problem gambling with this. But, at the end of the day, the bottom line, I have to look at, and is it generating enough, and where is it going? And so our goal is to increase that and continue to review the regulatory structure that encourages that flow from the illegal market into the legal market. It's also, a lot of that is on the operators or the vendors to aggressively market from the illegal to the legal market. So,
Got it. So you aren't earning that much yet. I mean, you're so 322,000 plus. Are you covering your costs? And what are your costs to regulate it? What is the cost of your office and stuff?
Great question. At this point, we are a very small staff. We are a very small office, and the cost of regulation, we haven't even dived into that bucket at this point. We have a lot of different situations that are going on, and we are moving into the next budget session. we will be focusing on delineating all of that out between our different programs, whether it's horse racing, whether it's the skill-based amusement games or sports wagering. So, I don't have those costs at this point in time. But from the amount of man hours that I see dedicated to this early on, we haven't seen the revenues come back to probably cover that at this point, but we're dual purposing in a lot of spots, so I do see it coming. I think that the revenues are going to be significant over the next 6-8 months, and it's growing leaps and bounds each month.
Do you have to do much in way of technology to sync up with the contractors or the agents, or is it seamless and they just do their thing through their portals and you didn't have to do much in the way of technology?
Yes, and great question also. The technology that comes with this, while it's a little different with the sports wagering versus horse racing and some of the other entities. We have a geolocation system that we utilize, the know your customer systems that are verifying age in the individuals is incredibly robust. We require auditing of those systems every year, and we require that auditing to be done. It's paid for by the operators. However, we use a third-party auditing firm that reviews those systems to make sure that they're functioning appropriately. Prior to launching, and again, in protecting here in Wyoming, obviously with the geolocation, and then we have the tribal entities that is carved out here. That product is if you haven't had an opportunity to maybe see some of the technology that backs up the functionality, I might suggest at some point maybe getting a presentation so you can see that, because I think once you've seen that back end technology that is verifying who the people are, where they're located. I mean, I can sit here, I could share a screen with you right now and show you, we can watch when wagers are being placed. Well, and I need to clarify that. You can see when they're connecting to the online system and where they are in the state.
So the operators pay for that hardware and software.
Correct. That is correct.
And can you just curious, when you just piqued my interest, how many wagers are placed a day? Do you have a?
I apologize. I don't have that information in front of me right at this point.
The numbers here are just staggering.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
And I'm sorry I don't have all that in front of me at this point. I would be more than happy to follow up with any of those and send that to you if you provided me an email, and I can sure furnish that to either your staff or yourselves.
And just ask one last question.
Yes.
What were you most surprised by? What have you been most surprised by in this whole process? What did you not anticipate? What have you been most surprised by?
Fantastic question again. And thank you.
This time, not a great
and thank you for that. And I think it's going to be, my answer is going to be a little different than what you may think. Going into this as a regulator and being a regulator for many years, you're cautious, you're concerned, you have those, all those big concerns. And as you step back and you look at everything, when you're done, you go, that was a little easier than I thought. It did require a tremendous amount of focus. It required a lot of cooperation between several people in our office, but also in the governor's office and in our legislative branch and with the operators. But it really it was an easier lift than I have had in the past and have right now. That's what I was surprised.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we may be in touch for follow-up information. Really appreciate you taking the time. I love your state.
I've never been to your state.
Well, thank you very much for your time and your focus on this. And if there's anything else that I can do to assist you or anyone else on your staff, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thank you.
So, thank you. So I'm going to proceed with Chris McIntyre, Charles McIntyre. Sorry, small print. You're the director in New Hampshire, I understand. Is that correct?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, I'm the executive director of the Hampshire Lottery, and I've been here for about 12 years. Before that, for 7 years, I was the assistant director of the Massachusetts Lottery, its general counsel, and before that, I was a state prosecutor. My focus was organized crime outside Boston. So that's my career in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Wow.
Well, welcome. So we're anxious. You've listened to Mr. Moore, sort of looking forward to understanding how long you've been in business, how quickly you were able to start up, any words of wisdom you may have for this committee. You know how legislatures operate, so we're a little gun shy of how quickly we can move here, but we know it's sort of in some ways it's a regulatory scheme and it's handing off most of the work for implementation to professionals with oversight by the state. So share with us your thinking.
Certainly. So our journey was a little different than most other states. A number of legislators approached me because of my background in actually sports betting, chasing illegal sports bookmakers. And they asked us to draft a law. And so the law that was passed by New Hampshire legislature was about 95% drafted by the folks here at our lottery. And we could have gone a number of different routes. Really, the sports betting function is owned by the state and operated by the state. And our partnership with DraftKings is a contractual relationship. It lasts for a number of years. It's renewable for a number of years thereafter. And then again, we'd go out to bid. And one of the tenets of the law is essentially that we are required to maximize profit for the state of New Hampshire. And so whatever goals we have, that's one of our fundamental goals. Obviously, it's to provide a safe, effective product for the consumer. And so the law was signed into effect in July of 19. We went out to a procurement process, and after approval of our partnership with DraftKings, we launched in 35 days, which I think is a record in the US in terms of
In 35 days.
Yes.
They launched in 35 days.
And so, and Governor Sununu was very clear to me, he wanted to be able to wager on the Patriots. He was very excited about the thought of wagering on the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So we were given approval November 25th, and we launched December 30th of 2019. And I canceled a lot of vacations, including my own for Christmas. But it launched, the governor wanted to be up by the Super Bowl. We launched prior to the playoffs. And that was a very good acquisition tool for the player base that came in and actually engaged with the platform and played, because several months later, the world shut down for COVID. So we had already been up and running and had acquired customers. And so we've been up since December 30th, 2019. I think we're number 1 or 2 in the country in terms of per capita revenues for sports betting. 1 or 2. Yes. So for example, in FY21, our return to the Education Trust Fund was $18 million. And this year we're tracking about $22 million profit to the state.
And it's designated for the education fund?
Correct. So the state of New Hampshire has a law which essentially requires every child to get an adequate education. And the Education Trust Fund, in large measure, sends grants to communities that don't have the significant tax bases to ensure each child gets an adequate education. And that's as far as I can speak to it. One of the best parts about my job is I just drop off a barrel of money at the State House and back away slowly. I don't have anything to do with how it's spent. So any questions thereafter would be fruitless on my point.
No, but that's good. Our lottery goes to our education fund as well.
Yes.
So when you say you made 18 million, we heard that you get 50% of DraftKings profits. Is that right?
So it's 50% minus some carve-outs. So one of the things we really wanted to do, and it was really driven personally by me, I wanted to not have what happened in Europe happen in my state, which is
What happened?
Pardon?
What happened in Europe?
Well, so you have a great number of operators, a great number of physical locations, and lots of marketing and advertising and offers through these sports betting platforms. And you see that constantly everywhere across many channels of marketing and advertising. And so you'll see a lot. And if you Google sort of advertising sports betting in Colorado or Arizona, you'll see folks who have your jobs frustrated with the number of ads they're seeing for sports betting currently. And we saw that as a sort of not a great look for the state. So we actually have a marketing contract with DraftKings. We provide in-state marketing through our ad firm and a guaranteed minimum spend every year, because we have an ad firm in state, obviously, through our lottery. And so we promote the platform in state. We guarantee $250,000 a year. We probably spend more than that. But what it does is it allows us to control the messaging and the narrative and where it's displayed and the like. So that's a deduction from the 50%, as well as there are a deduction, an allowance for offers and promotions from DraftKings that's up to 15% of the revenue, so that they can incentivize the player base to a certain level. And what you'll see is, and I think the prior speaker spoke to this, God bless you, he had a negative revenue month, which is frequent in these operations if there's no cap on promotional spend. There are a number of months where their sports betting will spend more than they make, and there'll be a negative revenue month. And so those are the two deductions essentially from the 50%. But like I said, it's still, it's a significant revenue stream.
Okay. And so your law allows you to contract with more than one operator, but you've chosen only to.
Correct. So when we went out to bid, we opened it up to the universe and said, dear sports betting world, here's what we have to offer. Please submit to us what you will do for us and what you will give us if you are one of between 5 to 10, if you are one between 1 of 3 and 5, or if you are one of 1. And we went through a bid process where we tiered the operators. There were 13 submissions, and we chose to speak with 5, because there were a number that were not adequate technologically, background-wise, et cetera. And so we said, listen, what will you offer us? And so DraftKings offered us not only to a significant revenue stream. We don't call it a tax. It's a rev share model. They also offered to open up an office in our state and move a number of positions to the office in Nashua. So there's actually corporate presence here. Their chief technology officer actually lives in Nashua. So it was an easy lift for him. He no longer had to drive to Boston. He now could just drive to, across town. So the governor was very clear. He wanted economic benefit as well in terms of business development.
Did the revenues you're receiving now, are they exceeding your expectation?
Yes, very much so. So we had estimated $10 million net profitability. We're more than double that. And like I said, I think we're number 2 in the country per capita last year of sports betting revenue. And it's a matter of how you draft the legislation and how you want, what policy decisions you make in terms of how much money you want. And it was one of the deciding factors was essentially when we were confronted with, if we choose 3, the going rate would have been 17%. If we chose one, the rate was 50%. And so the decision was essentially we'd have to triple sports betting in the state in order to break even, essentially running to standstill. And so we decided that wasn't the best model for us. And from a number of perspectives, not the very least of which was responsible gaming. And so, you know, that's the decisions we made.
So is that just sort of a common sense business calculation? I mean, when you entered into a contract with DraftKings and they came up with the percentage, did you tell them that they were going to be the sole operator?
Correct. Yes, internally we reviewed all the proposals. DraftKings came with the most compelling. Now it was certainly they had a home field advantage because they're in Boston, so they already had 20 employees in state. Their chief technology officer, as I suggested, their chief information security officer lives in New Hampshire. So, but for us, it was just a matter of this was the best financial deal for the state, and that's, you know, candidly who I serve, who we all serve.
So just so I'm clear, when Mr. Moore said 10% is his return, that's probably, it is comparing apples to apples, but you got the higher rate because you did a sole source contract as opposed to giving out 5 contracts.
Well, it's actually more than that because we also limited promotional offers, which a number of states don't do, which is they view the tax rate as gross gaming revenue is essentially the number of dollars left after you pay out prizes. So after you pay out all the winners, that's what's left. And if you're deducting promotions, there are a number of months where that will be a negative number, but not with us. We have made it so that it's virtually impossible for us to have a negative number in terms of revenue for the state.
You're saying you don't allow deductions for promotional efforts, is that what you're saying?
We limit it. We limit it so that in a given month, now it spreads out over the year, but we limit it so that it's never too high. Because
they probably don't need as much promotional.
No, and really the determining factor in terms of market is, are you offering a similar product to what's offered in the illegal market? And like I said, I was an organized crime prosecutor. I'm more than familiar with the illegal market. And so really what has to be is the experience that the user has to have is the exact same as the market. The only difference that we have is we don't allow credit. And that's a decision by us internally, personally by me. I do not allow credit cards or credit instruments because that's not money somebody has. That's money they're borrowing, which we don't want folks to get. We don't want folks to get hurt.
People can only use a debit card.
Debit card, you can do a cash transaction through your bank account. You can deposit actually one of our retail facilities, but we do not allow credit cards.
That's actually, I think, great.
So I guess the question du jour is the speed to market and the anxiety that you think it's easily overcome. We shouldn't be as worried in terms of moving forward quickly on this. I mean, there's been some talk about, we've heard anecdotally that a large percentage of the betting takes place in the NFL season, especially around the playoffs and March Madness. And so, you know, one choice for us as legislators, policy is to kick the can down the road, do a study committee and miss that and come back next year and enact something. Now we're in the last month of our session and there's pressure being put on, can we enact something quickly at our peril? And I just wondered what your thoughts are. I think you understand the question.
I certainly do. The speed to market is important. There are obviously, as you suggested, and you're not wrong, there are events which are market drivers. The biggest event is the college basketball tournament because there's so many games on and there's such widespread interest in the games. But football season is the largest in terms of revenue. It's the largest part, it just is. So it doesn't matter that you're up by the beginning of football season, but certainly if you want to be the widest market, it would be during football season. And one of the surprises you'll find is the number of participants is not as many as you would think. We've been up and running now for, well, since December of 19.
Yeah.
And we only have 80,000 people on our platform, and that includes a bunch of folks from other states. So it's not like the lottery where, half of your state adult population obviously has bought a Powerball ticket in the last year. It's less widespread than that.
Really? I'm interested. So your lottery participation is higher than your sports betting
Oh, significantly.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, mind you, we have a very robust lottery. I mean, I think we're number one in the country per capita for Powerball sales, so we do pretty well. But it's much more broad-based. You also have to realize it's in 1,400 stores across the state, and so every time you walk in to buy a soda or pay for gas, you're next to one of our terminals.
So,
do you see any evidence that not allowing credit cards and having one vendor might push people to illicit markets? Do you track that at all?
The only tracking I've done is I have both talked to folks who bet and who used to bet in the legal market, and I've talked to law enforcement, and they both have expressed that I should end up with a horse's head in my bed because we've utterly destroyed the legal market in New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts. I firmly believe folks want to do things legally, and folks want consumer protections. Like, for example, regardless of the wager, we're going to pay if you win. Whereas in the illegal market, there's not always that guarantee because you can't then go to the police and ask them to sort of enforce your bet. As a prosecutor, used to make this claim all the time, that once you work outside the bounds of the law, you lose the protection of it. And so with us, you are working within the bounds of the law. We have a consumer complaint process. You can call me directly. I have a head of sports betting who manages all of our complaints, of which there are not frequent, but it occurs. Somebody didn't get their bet in time. The pool closed before they get all those questions. So I know anecdotally, as you can imagine, getting a number on accurate number on illegal conduct is not easy. But both from folks who used to bet with bookies as well as law enforcement, we've done great.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done very well, Charles McIntyre. You're the perfect person to transition an illegal market to a legal market. And you're right, the benefits of illegality are substantial for consumers. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly to your point, Senator, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure I fully got the information I wanted from the question. I mean, I know you framed the high season for betting more clearly for me, but is there, the question is a process question for me at this point. Should we feel confident that we can structure something in this period of time, or do we need to take more time and gather more information and evidence, and are there so many decision points in this structure that it's going to be hard to pass a law in this period of time, or dangerous to pass a law in this period of time?
Sure. I mean, certainly, I don't think the passage of law is going to be dangerous. And it's just revenue that you're missing out on currently. And I've spoken with your lottery director, Andrew Collier, a number of times about this, and I've offered our assistance in that regard as well. So I wouldn't feel uneasy about the guardrails you can put around this. The question of it is how you build it. And this is obviously a legislative initiative, and this is a creature of statute. So how you build it is how it gets built.
Given your governor's enthusiasm for the Super Bowl and for the Patriots, was it in New Hampshire an administrative initiative or a legislative one?
So, like I said, a number of state reps came to us and asked us to draft the law, and we handed them the draft law.
I missed hearing that. I'm sorry.
No, it's no worries. Sorry. So a number of state reps asked us that we had familiarity with. I've been here a long time, so obviously have excellent relationships with the State House and the folks in the House of Representatives. And they asked us to hand them a law that they thought would be workable and would be ideal for the state. And that's what we handed. So it was a legislative initiative, but it was a bill drafted by us.
So, would you continue to be, if we got you some questions, would you be willing to get back to us? I'm thinking one of the things we'd like our lawyers to do, and they may have done this already, is to, in our legislation, what are the key decision points we need to make in terms of what needs to be decided by the legislature or what can be delegated to the lottery commission or stuff like that. It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on which ones you think are the most important ones that should be in statute and policy decisions versus stuff that are more either ministerial or administrative or implementation phases and where those lines cross.
Sure. I mean, as I suggested, our relationship is actually contractual, and that makes it easier for us to amend our relationship with DraftKings, which we've done a number of times, in terms of things we thought we knew or things personally I thought I knew that I didn't know, and changes in our relationship. So allowing that level of administrative freedom has been advantageous.
That's interesting because, so you're saying you haven't had any problems in changing contracts midstream if you've identified areas where you've had problems?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example if you want, Mr. Chairman. So we had a prior requirement that our revenues be recognized weekly. And that wasn't how DraftKings did their books. They did them monthly. And so having them create a process internally to do it weekly just caused friction, caused you change the unnatural flow of their operation. And it just didn't work well. It was very difficult. Our CFO commented like, Charlie, this doesn't make any sense. We don't need it weekly. We can wait monthly. And I said, that makes complete sense. And so we changed the nature of the agreement saying, okay, folks, no longer do you need to report it weekly. You can do it monthly. And that immediately solved about 10 problems related to balancing and reconciling. And if we had done that in statute, it would have been a nightmare. It would have been unfixable in a short order.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. Very helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
And we may be in touch. This is moving pretty fast.
Of course.
So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll join you soon.
For your, just one last question on the legislative progress of your efforts. Were your Senate and your House equally supportive of this adventure?
Yes, I believe. I mean, I don't recall the vote numbers, but it was overwhelmingly in favor. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And it was bipartisan. It was both left. It was not a political discussion. It was very much bipartisan.
Well, it's not a political activity. Well, there are political bets. But
no, we don't take those, thankfully, but there are European bookmakers that do.
Oh, indeed they do.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Well,
you.
We're going to move on to
Have a good
Riyadh.
weekend.
You too.
Riyadh.
Riyadh. How do we pronounce that?
Brianne.
Riyadh.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. We're very anxious to hear from you. We, in every iteration so far of this bill, we've definitely identified problem gambling as an issue that needs to be front and center in our thinking. So welcome, identify yourself and tell us what you think.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brianne Dorashawal, and I am here on behalf of the National Council on Problem Gambling. And we appreciate this opportunity to give some feedback about the draft, as well as just answer any concerns that you may have around this issue. I really appreciated Mr. McIntyre's comments just a little while ago as it relates to their commitment to problem and responsible gambling, as well as some of the sentiments around what's happening in the UK and across Europe, One of those concerns is actually really surrounding this issue of harm and gambling addiction. They actually have 55,000 children now that have a gambling addiction and 400,000 adults, in roughly the size of the equivalent of like a state of Alabama. And a lot of that had to do with the lack of oversight and regulations around this issue of problem gambling. And it is a true public health issue, and one that I think needs to get addressed a little bit more substantively if you were to pursue this legalization. Yes?
Brianna, sorry, are those in Europe or are those here in America, the 400,000 adults and 55,000 kids?
That's actually just in the UK. Here in the United States, there's roughly 2 million Americans that are currently struggling with a gambling addiction, and another 4 to 6 million that are considered at risk. Although state-by-state prevalence studies have shown that in certain jurisdictions, those numbers are increased. So it is not the 1 to 2% of the population that's perceived. We also know that anytime there's an introduction of new forms of gambling, there simultaneously will be an increase in problems, which is why I'm proud to be able to speak with you today. Because inevitably, with the introduction of sports wagering, and we are not here to say not do it, that is not the case at all, but there are things that you need to do to mitigate and reduce the harm that will inevitably come for some. And this product is very attractive to the younger population. I did note in the draft that you would be open to allowing 18-year-old plus to engage in this Class 3 game. I did want to note that I understand your neighbors in New Hampshire as well as Rhode Island do allow 18-year-olds to participate, although the state of Oregon and now Ohio have decided that while the lottery does oversee the product, they have decided, given its Class 3 gaming classification, other types of Class 3 games would be like your poker, your table games, that it is appropriate to be consumed by 21 plus. We know the younger you are and the younger you engage with gambling products, the more likely you are to struggle with an addiction later in life. So I'm not here to say one way or the other, recognizing the size of your state, the revenue opportunities, as well as what your neighbors are doing. But I did want you to have that information that age is something we do note and follow. Additionally, you don't have any increased funding in this bill. It's something that the majority of states have done when they have legalized sports wagering in order to go to preventing and treating gambling addiction. The state currently has the lottery contributing $150,000 to problem gambling services. Having a subsequent increase in the supports and funding is going to be vital in order to meet the needs of the consumers across Vermont. Other things that we noticed is that, and Mr. McIntyre did a great job of talking about concerns around advertising. In statutes across the US, we are seeing a mandate to use helpline information on all marketing and advertising, prominently displaying where people can get help on the platforms. So if you were to move forward with the 6 operators, ensuring that they are prominently displaying that if someone were to be struggling with their gambling, that help and hope exists, and this is how they can get in contact with someone. Similar to Mr. McIntyre, there are concerns around the utilization of credit cards and the linkage to harm and gambling addiction. The UK and other jurisdictions, Australia, some here even within the US have banned the use of credit cards. In the UK, they went as far as to ban the use of e-wallets that are funded by credit cards because research has shown a linkage to problem gambling and the utilization of monies that people do not have. And then the other thing that I believe the state's really lacking and could benefit from is an annual research agenda around this topic about what is the current state of gambling addiction in the state, how would the legalization of sports wagering positively and negatively impact the state? And then how effective are the programs that are currently being deployed across the state, not only contributing to the positive education and awareness around this issue, and how effective are they combating the addiction? I'd be happy to answer more general questions, or I've had the pleasure of working in almost every jurisdiction that's legalized now on this topic of problem and responsible gambling. And I've worked in 26 countries around this policy initiative. So please, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Sarah,
Brianne, thank you. When you said that 55,000 children have gambling addiction or are identified as having gambling addiction, was that 18 and under? And where does that figure come from? And largely, what are they engaged in? Are we talking about sports betting, or are we talking about like?
Well, in England, everything they've got on.
It's about everything. Obviously, and there's a major gambling review, regulatory review happening in the UK. And again, a lot of it was predicated on this outcry from the public that there was a public health crisis around harm. As Mr. McIntyre pointed out, advertising and marketing was proliferating, and he's very much right. I'm working in certain states that have since legalized and are concerned that there aren't really any guardrails around just the sheer volume of advertising and that influence on children. In the UK at the time, they were actually allowing gambling around 16. So obviously that does impact the numbers. But again, that's why I brought up at the onset about just noting 18. Again, I'm not saying one way or the other. I just want to put it out there because this is a very attractive product, more so than say slots or other types of gambling products. And that's where that number in the UK comes from. Much of it is around engagement in sports wagering. And it is through their gaming commission that has the study, and I'd be happy to provide that research if it would be helpful to the committee or anyone who is interested.
Did you mention a number in the US about children specifically?
I don't have a number specifically for the entire US. The one thing here that's really tricky and really important for you to note is the federal government absolutely does nothing by way of gambling addiction. Because gambling is left up to be legalized and regulated at the state level, they are also charging the states to be responsible for gambling addiction. We're the only addiction without any federal oversight. So the feds have never commissioned a national prevalence study looking at these rates. So we don't have a lot of data on the number of children now, which is why I would urge you all to consider an annual research agenda to look at what's happening.
Thanks. But 2 million, you said, adults, as far as you could tell. In the United
Yes,
States.
and those are considered conservative estimates. The state of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and several others have annual research agendas that look at prevalence rates. New Jersey actually found that over 6% of their adult population was struggling with a gambling addiction several years back. With the legalization of sports wagering and online gaming, those numbers are expected to be higher. We are waiting on the next version of the research to see what we're looking at.
Brianne, could you, it's probably in your materials stuff, but do you have like model provisions that you suggest to states that are going down this road?
Yes, sir. We do have language around what a good fund would look like. We advocate that around 2.5% of gross gaming revenue. Both Mr. Moore, Mr. McIntyre spoke at length about promos, free to play. There are certain jurisdictions that had delineated a percentage of the revenue for problem gambling and found that the contributions were significantly lower because it was coming after the adjusted gross revenue. So what would happen is all of those deductions would happen, and then the contributions to problem gambling were smaller than anticipated. There are states like Michigan, New Hampshire, Wyoming that did a flat contribution, DC as well, every year to a problem gambling fund, having both the input of the regulator as well as your Department of Public Health. That was the other thing I would like to point out. I was exhaustively going through Vermont's resources website around this issue of problem gambling. Right now, I see it very closely tied to the lottery. Getting your Department of Public Health or mental health involved, I think would be vital, especially someone who's struggling, knowing that they are being able to turn to like almost a neutral expert and not going to a gaming regulator, I think adds a level of comfort and confidence.
Brianne,
Yes.
can you, for those of us who just don't know, at what point is it problem gambling? Is there a trigger number of bets per day, or how do you identify a problem gambler?
That's a great question. Thank you. So it is actually,
Question again.
it's a true addiction the way someone might struggle with alcohol or drug, but in the clinical world, there's certain criteria and there's no magic number, right? I wish I could say if someone spends $100 a day, that would be considered to be a problematic gambling. But I could spend $10 a day and it consume all of my thoughts and all of my relationships, and it's impeding my ability to actually function, right? And you could spend $100 once and then move on and can afford it and still pay all your bills. I would be the individual considered to have a problem with my gambling where you would not, because it's how it negatively impacts your life, how it impacts your thoughts, your finances. So I wish I could tell you what that magic number is. It's not about the money. It's about your relationship with gambling and how it's impacting the rest of you holistically. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yes, I was just wondering if there was a trigger point at which you identify that somebody must have a problem gambling.
No, but there are things.
Number of bets or how much money it's.
Yeah.
It could be money in relation to your total income, but I was thinking that there was some criteria,
But there is a lot of validity in a lot of new technology that's being developed through these online platforms about incentivizing customers to actually utilize limit setting features, which was actually noted, I believe, on page 6 of the draft, where it talks about offering daily, weekly, monthly, and time limits, and then giving real-time data information to the consumer. Research shows us that consumers are most likely, and not just with gambling, many things, significantly going to underreport how much time and money they've spent on something. It's so easy to do, right? Because it's in one click and it's not, there's no friction, there's no turning over cash. And so players are actually willing to spend more within their means if they're given this information in real time and they're given the opportunity to set their own limits. And there's a lot of great technology being developed out there looking at player behavior and customer interventions when trends change. And so really requiring operators to deploy these type of technological advances in their platforms not only behooves them, because customers are willing to stay and play longer with an operator that they trust and they don't feel is going to exploit them, but will protect the people of Vermont by at large knowing that there are systems in place.
Thank you.
No, I just right before the floor. That's all.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna, thank you so much. We very well may have you back. We look forward to seeing your material in writing as well. We're very sensitive to that topic. So, Commissioner, we're doing the floor on one of our bills, so we'll probably take this up again late next week when we start dealing with pick up the alcohol bill again. So that's right in your wheelhouse as well. Mm-hmm. So double duty. So we will say we'll adjourn right now.